so what, that's kind of what my hot topic was the off-market stuff, but what are you seeing? I know you mentioned you had a pretty cool buyer. We've been desperately seeking buyers. We've been pretty listing heavy this year. So we're excited to maybe get a potential buyer on something that we really like. And I know she reached out to you recently. What's the story there?
Yes, it's one of our neighbors, and she's thinking about, she always has this dream about having a lake home. And she knows we have helped a lot of neighbors. I feel like now we are we should work in the tourist office in LBJ Lake,
right.
Because I think we have bring a lot of people, especially from Allendale all the way to
Right.
Kingsland.
We have a lot of our same neighbors in Allendale that live on our same street, also live on our same street out in Kingsland.
We are, our lake home is in, river. Some people call it river because it's part of the river, Llano River, but it's the lake, LBJ Lake. It's Kingsland, but that lake has a lot of little towns, as we're gonna explain here shortly. But so in this case, they want to buy a lake home, a second home, and a lot of people see it as an impossible. Two things. I think it's a lot of rumors about whether Airbnbs are saturated in these areas. I want to make money out of my second home, and these areas are already, top, like you cannot fit a single more Airbnbs.
Right, which can be true. Are they wanting to, because not everybody even wants to as short-term rental theirs. Do you know if that's something that they want to do?
She mentioned she wants to, but it's not like a priority to do it, which that's probably the best way to go about it, because you like we were talking about it, like back in the day when you buy a ranch or a lake home or a place in Denver, you never imagined to make any money out of it.
Right.
You buy it because it was your dream, because you vacation in it, because you share it with your family, but it wasn't a possibility to make any money out of it. So nowadays, in fact, the Airbnb or VRBO are an option is a plus.
Huge plus. In fact, a lot of people look at it as like, so as you said, back then, that's why you also saw a lot of the lake cottages. Like nowadays, lake houses are getting a little bit bigger and fancier because there is this luxury of being able to use it as a kind of a use, but also rental. So, if the saturation part of it, people are like, oh, well, everybody's doing it. There's too many of them. And, with interest rates, it's going to be a little harder to flow and a little more expensive and such. But, to your point, if just because I can't per se profit, like I'm making more every month than I'm using to pay on my mortgage and such, doesn't mean it's not a good thing. If I want a lake house, like I used to have to go and pay for the whole thing myself. Now I can use it as little as I probably would, or back then even, go all the time, rent it out the rest of the time. You're going to at least cover your taxes and insurance and probably a good chunk of your mortgage as well. So just because it doesn't necessarily give you a cash flow doesn't mean it's still not a great opportunity.
Yes, and that's some of the things that you need to question, or we ask our clients when they're looking about a second home. Okay, how far do you want it to be the second home? Like, are you willing to travel? Because a lot of people are mountain people, and we are lake people. So and I don't know if we're lake people, but
it's just close.
It's close.
Right.
It's close, and with 3 kids and life and things, we never know if we're going to be able to go this weekend or not. So it's more like, is it available? Is it open? And it's only an hour away. So let's get in the car and let's go.
Right.
So when you are thinking about a beach home, that the closest in Austin
Which
can
we
be...
did.
Which we did. We looked at,
we were looking there.
we're looking at Galveston area or Port Aransas, which are amazing. I'm from a beach town, so I love that. But it's also 5 hours away, so it's not like a quick getaway.
Right.
With crazy life.
Right. Because even when we jump out, sometimes it's like, hey, look, it's not rented. Everybody's off. Let's run out there. Let's go spend some time. It's an hour to get out there. And then worst case, something comes up with work. We go like, oh my God, I gotta go show a house. Well, it's no big deal.
Yes.
In some cases, we're showing out north, so it's almost the same distance to go from home to north as it is from the lake to north.
Exactly.
So,
and
it's recoverable as well. You're not overcommitted. Certainly haven't jumped on a plane to go. To your short-term rental.
And some families are very organized with their vacations, and our jobs are difficult because we kind of are in the mercy of the client when it's available to see it and everything. And weekends, we have to work weekends. But a lot of families are more organized with their time off. So Maybe a house in Denver or in Winter Park makes more sense because they want to ski and they know exactly a week in November or a week in the holidays they can get away and they can do it, but still they can rent it out. So another thing if your options are to rent it out when you are not using it, it's very important to check these areas because as Airbnbs started exploding, a lot of communities, a lot of municipalities start getting more strict about rules and short-term rentals. So you really have to look for the specific bubbles.
And vice versa. So we had a few that kind of came. It's like, we notice because our area allows, it's unincorporated in Kingsland. So, we had that luxury. And even when the boom was kind of going through and prices were rising, it was kind of a normal phase. I mean, we've been there for a little over 10 years now. So, from 15 or so to 19, those kind of normal years, we were seeing prices in our area moving up more than some of these areas that were restricted because it opens you up. They had more potential buyers who could buy this and short-term rental, if not for profit, at least, as we said, to help them pay for it. So if I've got, I can buy this one where I can short-term rental it, or I can buy that one, but I can't, well, I can afford more on this one. So they're more in demand, and therefore those prices were going up a little bit more. And as we kind of suspected and told a few people, there's a couple spots that didn't. Well, rumors were coming around and they were getting a lot of heat, and a lot of people were doing it anyway without too much repercussion. So that was kind of a sign. And then they sort of lifted it. Now there's certain HOAs in those areas still that were going to restrict it, but for the most part, those areas opened up, and they've started doing better as well. They've started seeing better price appreciation.
Yeah, in our case, that specific section is like you mentioned, it's not city, so you wouldn't have a city ordinance for it. But like you said, HOA is different, so you have to look for both. You need to know the city rules and the HOA rules, and sometimes they contradict each other. So and HOAs have a lot of power, at least in Texas. I don't know in Colorado, but at least in Texas they can foreclosure. I mean, they can do a lot. They can do a lot of things. And fine you in the meantime and give you a hard time. So you really need to look into those HOA rules.
They're really more restrictive than the city ordinances or deed restrictions or things like that. Some deed restrictions are just practically irrelevant. They're so old. But yeah, the HOA is, especially if you live next to one of those HOA people or on the street with one of those people that's like, hey, you can't do that. And they're always watching you. It's different than just the city. Do they know? Do they not? I don't know.
Yes.
I mean, we've heard plenty of stats here. We ran one of our properties as a rental here in the city for a little while. And I've helped lots of people do that. But the companies that manage them that we've talked to, they gave us somewhere estimates between 85, some even said 90%. At least this was 2 to 3 years ago, but that were running short-term rentals were not registered, permitted in the city of Austin, which requires it, supposedly. There's different types, which we won't go into, but there's 3 types of permits you can get for that. And just the majority of people don't. Some got fined. I had some clients that got fined, and they'd pull it out and they'd do it again, and then I think he got fined again. And one of them, we ended up selling that. But it's restrictive in some ways. But yeah, I'd say back to it, the HOA is probably the one you want to watch out for the most.
Yeah, and for the HOAs, I'm thinking more like areas like Port Aransas, where you have your communities. Like Cinnamon Shores, they have very specific rules about short-term rentals and how many units of the whole community are short-term rentals. So you kind of need to get online for all that. I don't know where they are, but that's how they started when they start building. So the newer communities in these more developed sections. And the beauty of lakes is that it kind of create the city around it without being a city. So they just start putting houses around the lake because it was around the lake. And so it is more options out there. And
more free.
More free. Even the one that we have in New Braunfels is ETJ. So it's not really New Braunfels. And no HOA. Right. So it's very important to see which areas according to your goals. And talking about finances, we are not lenders, so depending on your situation, but normally you you want to take a look at your finances, first of all, because you cannot fully account that even if you short-term rental is going to fully pay for it. So lenders look at second homes very differently. They don't take like short-term rental, Airbnb credit for your future projections of how much you can rent it. So you really need to be prepared to put 20% down, and the type of loan is different.
And qualify for it. So like you said, in sometimes, whether you're buying maybe an investment as an investment, or you're gonna move and you're gonna keep your existing home and that's gonna be the investment, in most cases, not all, but they can give you, they'll be able to do their research and know what the general market rate for that type of property would be, and they'll, depending on the loan, some give more, but usually they'll give you at least like 70% of that value to count against your debt to income ratio, because they know you're going to be able to get that rented out if you want to. In this case, with a short-term rental, that's not likely going to be the case. They're not going to give you that credit, unless you were truly going to just rent it out long-term. They'll give you that rate. But of course, you need to be cautious on that. I'm not giving that advice. And that rate is almost never going to be anywhere close to what the short-term rate would be. In other words, annually speaking, you're going to be able to make more short-term rentals than you would for a long-term.
A regular type of rental, yes. But lenders always wanted to be more, well, at least regular lending. I mean, they are out-of-the-boxes and out-of-the-box type of lending where they lend you exactly on the project, but then you pay because of the rate that they give you, because it's a high risk. Because what if you don't manage it correctly? And that's another thing that you really need to consider. How far is your short-term rental, and are you going to be able to manage it yourself? Do you have the time? Because it is, and I can see it because Chad does the ones for us, it is a full-time job. I mean, especially in the summer.
It is.
It's seasonal for us, but the summer you are very busy with the managing of the properties.
With the managing of it, so the booking, managing of it, and so I'm sure you're alluding to the visits to make repairs here and there, go make sure there's not overloading of trash and little things like that happen. And it's my personality, so I don't feel like it's working, and I'm at a lake. Come on. But I enjoy that part. But you do need to be aware of it for sure. And that's where also having local crews, people that, if you don't know them going in, like if we were to help you and you were in areas that we're very familiar with, we now have a pretty good set of local crews on both the Highland Lakes chain as well as the Guadalupe chain. Just from our own experiences, we're starting to build that pretty well. But it's a pretty important part because it's not terribly often. One of the there's pros and cons to these versus long-term rentals is that a lot of people have a long-term rental that they put somebody in there and it's just like, well, 12 months, 24 months, however long later, like, oh gosh, I hope it's still there. I hope it looks good. I haven't even been in it in 2-3 years. You don't know what's going on over there. These, it's a little more, maybe more people coming in it, but for short periods of time. So, I've always kind of joked, these houses get cleaned way more than our house gets cleaned, and they're checked on pretty regularly because people are coming in every 2, 3, 4, 5 days and then out. And so you get a lot more hands-on to it. So, it's more, you got to deal with more cleaning and such. But I think it's kind of a perk, really, to having it that way. But if you've got emergencies that come up and, even though, like we said, we're only an hour away and I've made my fair share running out there to fix an AC or whatever the case might be, but having somebody local, especially just a general handyman, is super helpful. Backed up toilet or something that's usually not that big of a deal, but it requires somebody to go help. It's huge. But, your HVAC people, your plumbers. Yeah. Those people
if you don't want to deal with it, then have a management, which you also have very good contacts of people who will fully manage it for you. Of course, you have to give a percentage, but it's a percentage that you don't like. Yes, and they are going to make sure they rent it a lot because they make a percentage. So the more they rent it, the more they make. So it's a good, and they know everything about the algorithm in VRBO and Airbnb and what Airbnb likes and what a VRBO likes. And so the back end of that job, just like the front end, like fixing an AC, is another job. So If you don't feel like, okay, that sounds like overwhelming to me, I prefer to have somebody else, or at least in the beginning, until you get established and you learn about the house also. I think it's also a good idea to just hire somebody,
Yes.
hire out to that part.
Yes, and even there's a lot of great tools out there, which we've recently started using, which I've come to love. You know, I love self-managing things, as we've discussed, but some of these tools have been really great, and one of them, kind of as you're alluding to, is pricing and knowing how to price things and what your competition's doing. And there's tools out there in some of these management companies that just have it down, and they know, but not only what it should be in comparison to competition, but in cases where there might be an event coming through town, you're not even aware of it, and demand jumps up, and they know about it, and so they price you accordingly. It's like, hey, in 2 weeks there's this convention going on, you should raise your pricing. And just for the quick story of it, we we learned the value of that on the New Braunfels property when we had just signed up for Price Labs, right? And almost the day before, got the calls from somebody directly. I don't know if it was a past guest or what, but they were coming in and wanted to see, if we can get them a special rate, which we obliged. It was great.
It was off season too.
It was off season, and we were just looking. We weren't going to be there. It was like, yeah, that'll be great. And we had them and gave them a nice little deal. And then I plugged in the price lines, and this thing shot up. I think we were charging them about $400 a night, and the Price Labs came in and said you should be charging $1,700 a night. And I was like, what? This thing's stupid. This is all wrong. And then I looked at the little thing about it, and it said the Final Four is in San Antonio that weekend, and you should be charging a lot more. Sure enough, those guests were coming in to go to the Final Four.
Yeah, and they got a heck of a deal.
They got a heck of a deal.
Yeah.
But it was fun. It still worked out. It was an off-season thing, like you said, and it was still good. But
yeah, but
good
sometimes,
to have tools.
exactly. Sometimes when you don't have the tools or the professionals behind it, you lose money. Even you think you're saving money, then you're leaving money on the table for details like that. So it is important to know what I do time, like how much time are you going to devote to this second home, or if you prefer to leave it to somebody else.
Yeah, and we've got clients, even some of those neighbors we talked about, who are on both spectrums there. We have some that never, here's where I'm going to be there, make sure it's not booked, and they go, and they, the management takes care of everything else. And then we have others that are more like us, and they're out there and they're self-managing. I think a couple of them even like to go out there and mow their own lawn. It's just the personality type.
Yeah, and I mean that's all for short-term rental. But aside from short-term rental, on your goals when you're looking at second homes, just like some people like skiing and go to Colorado and they just want to be close to a ski resort. If you prefer the lakes or you prefer to drive less, Austin has an endless options.
We have a ton. Yeah, I think most people kind of know. We have the Highland chain, as we discussed earlier, which is the one that runs through Austin eventually, so people know more about that one. But the same thing down on the Guadalupe chain, where it's a series of dams that create these different lakes. And yeah, you got to know, as we've talked about, which ones are potentially STR friendly or not. But
which
also
are constant
your constant level. And that's really the biggest one people want to know. What's your constant level, which are not. Just as an example, the Highland Lakes, which is the most well known around here because it ends up here in Austin. But it starts out as Buchanan, which is the biggest, but it's a reservoir. It's designed for water use, and so it fluctuates dramatically because it's the first, and a lot of times we get rain somewhere in between on down, so the people, all the lakes that are there down benefit, but not the first one. So it's first, and then it feeds into Inks, which is a cool little lake. It's constant level, but it's small. It's quaint and has its own little quirk things to it with water sources, and then that feeds into LBJ, which has two different arms. So it has the Colorado arm, which is all part of the Colorado River, runs on down, and then we have the Llano arm, which comes in and they feed together and feed on down. That Llano arm is where we are, and that gives you just a little different vibe and a little feel, a little bit more natural river-like kind of atmosphere. And then that feeds into Lake Travis, so the early part of Lake Travis, which also looks a little bit like a river, But it's not constant either. It's also a reservoir, so it will fluctuate. And at times like actually right now, we just got a big couple of rains, which has helped a lot, but it's still pretty dramatically down. And that can be like that for years. We're not talking about seasonally. That can be like that for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, like in the around 2010 to 2015, dry. So, and then you go on into Lake Austin, which is again constant levels, super expensive. That's right here in the town. And then it goes into Lady Bird Lake, which is, no boating. That's a different kind of thing. There's not really many residents along there. And then it becomes the Colorado River again. It flows on out. Eventually lands in the ocean.
And same thing with the chain in New Braunfels.
Same thing. It's a different set. Just starts with the Canyon Lake.
And it's exactly the same concept. Some areas you cannot do any boating, and some areas is only kayaks, and other ones. So it really section off different areas. It also prices in the houses are different because of it. The ones that are constant level, they might be more pricey. The ones you might find, especially right now, you might find a better deal in Lake Travis or in Buchanan because the water is really down. And
you may not be waterfront right now.
You might not be waterfront, but if you wait, you are.
Yeah.
Like when we bought a New Braunfels, when the lake was down, because it actually wasn't because it was in constant lake. It's because they had an issue in one of the floods and the dam got destroyed.
Actually, wasn't even a flood, but yeah, that's what I was going to say. So you kind of got to know about what's going on, not just on the reservoirs or not, but even some of these constant lakes can have their issues at some time. And that dam broke, back in 2019, I think it was, and it just dropped like 20 feet instantly.
Yeah.
And they were just kind of stuck, and they finally put it together and got it rebuilt. And that connected, because that was like a 90 to 100-year-old dam. And so they realized that all these were in a little disarray. And so now they've started doing it to the series, and they're rebuilding all those, which is great.
Now McQueen is down.
Yeah, so right now,
but it will come
McQueen's
back
down,
up.
it'll come up, and then Placid and so on. So, just kind of knowing what's going on and when those are due to be back, and also what taxes may come with that, because that was a project that the community got together, and then you have a little, like a mud or a PID. It's the same thing, you're chipping in to pay for that.
LCRA and the other one in Guadalupe.
The Guadalupe chain is the GRDA. So you just kind of got to know what's going on with all those as well. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is as we said, I don't hear it as much because short-term rental has become so big of people that are buying them to not short-term. But I have. I mean, the last clients we helped out there in Cottonwood Shores, they don't plan to do it.
That's by Marble Falls.
Yeah, near on the Marble Falls Lake, actually. So, it's not everybody, but the rumors that are being told, or just some truth, is that, it did get pretty heavily saturated. Everybody was coming out trying to buy these, especially in 21, 22, and just COVID, and everybody was trying to get out of town and buy land and have places to go and all that. Those particularly went way up, and people knew they could rent them out, and it got pretty saturated. And we're starting to see some of those come back. Some people are like, hey, this was harder than I thought, and they're bailing. Because they were buying it more as a business.
Exactly.
They don't necessarily use it, or
but as a second home, it's still working.
Yeah.
Yeah, if your math work and your personal life, it's like buying a regular home. If it works for your finances, if it makes sense to you, go ahead and buy it,
Yeah.
And same thing with second homes. You need to have that extra, no counting on the Airbnbs, whether it's going to rent or not.
Yes. So that's the perfect combination. If you got somebody that's like, hey, I just want a second home, I might rent it. Great, because you're going to be real happy when I can kind of show you pretty easily, but you can go out and you want to rent it once a month or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Control it and just make some extra money. And some people are hesitant because they don't like people in their house or whatever. That's just fine. But once you start doing it, and you realize how it's not what you kind of, because I worried about that at first. Man, once you break that seal and kind of get going, you can really start turning those things.
Yeah. So if you have more questions about second homes, give us a call and we're happy to help.
Love to.